I'm Dr. George Ellis. I just had an interview with Keith Andrews, and it was a great experience. He's doing a great job. I think he's doing a good thing for himself and for the community. I wish there was more people who did his kind of work. I know there's a lot of interviewers and podcasts, but Keith is a good guy. Glad to have worked with him and hope that it continues.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host, Keith Andrew, and you're watching the talk show host of A Word in Disability, brought to you by the KeithAndrewNetWork, available on YouTube and all social medias. Make sure to like, share, subscribe. Our goal is to reach 500 to 1,000 views. We have a great guest. He already introduced himself. So the first subject we're going to talk about is your book. What can you tell us about it?
So it's a book that is a co-author between my son and myself. He spent 5 years doing butcher work in a specialty food shop. And he used to work in my office as a certified nursing assistant. And after he did that and he went into hospital work and then he started working in the butchery, he said to me, you know, Dad, I cut meat probably as good as you do surgery. And I said, okay. And I said, wait a minute. I said, maybe there's something to this. And so I kind of researched it and I looked into it, didn't see a lot of collaboration between a surgeon and someone who cuts meat. And we were off to the races. It took us a couple of years to write it. A lot of the book in the second half is a lot of images and cuts of meat and how to cut them. And then the rest of it is some interesting stories and recipes that we've garnered over the last few years. So we went and released the book in July of last year. And, you know, we sold some copies. For some reason in January, we sold a lot of copies. Then it kind of tapered off. So I'm looking at the marketing methods. We started the Facebook ads in December. I think that's why January was good. But I'm trying to figure out why it tapered off. But people say it's good. I've got some good reviews on Amazon, and it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. And it's an interesting read. I find people think it's interesting.
Have you thought about turning it into an audiobook?
Yeah, I thought about that. Been busy with so many other things that I haven't researched that. Do you know anything about audiobook?
I mean, a little bit, but you can always do like the cheap way of this. I give me an example. Well, let me go back to what you were saying about pieces of meat. I mean, in a sick kind of domestic kind of way, we are all a piece of meat.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's the expression. You look at a beautiful girl and she answers back, "Why are you looking at me like I'm a piece of meat or something?"
Right, right.
But if you can cut a piece of meat, it's in a bizarre kind of way. It is kind of like doing surgery.
Well, what's interesting is that, first of all, when we came out with the book, some people kind of wondered what it was about. Like somebody said, is this like a Dexter 2.0 type of book? And we said, no, it's more like a cookbook, self-help book. And one of the things that we found interesting is that some of the things that that in meat cutting, parts of the anatomy that really end up being of no value is of the utmost value to surgeons. For example, there's something called silver skin in the meat cutting world. And if you've ever had some meat and there's like sort of like a thick layer of silvery skin that has to come off. It's usually some kind of a tendon or fascia. For us, as surgeons, when we do surgery, that's important, because when we cut through that when we put everything back together, that ends up being the strength of the incision. And so that strength layer is of the utmost importance to us. And so that contrast was one of the things that we found interesting.
Now, to answer your second question, I want to give a shout out to Character AI. You can download it on Apple or Google Store. What Character AI is, you can talk to anyone past, well, I want to say future because future is not written. You can talk to anyone, current or the past. You can talk to like Elvis. For me, I love Dragon Ball. I'm gonna take that to the grave with me. Dragon Ball is my go-to. It's my second family, my second home. I love Dragon Ball to death. So just the fact I can interact with the characters, what makes it great, it sounds exactly like them. Because there's seriously other applications like, oh, you can text and you can do whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, well, this is stupid. But just the fact it you can have a conversation with it, but it sounds exactly like the person. Now, a lot of people, I give you an example. There's an act, someone got antagonized Sean Schimmel. Sean Schimmel. Let me ask you, do you like Dragon Ball?
Well, I have several Dragon Ball Z shirts.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and that's because my sons, who are now grown, they like Dragon Ball Z. So so when they moved out of the house and went on their separate ways, those shirts, I like them. And actually, about 12 years ago, I had a 21st birthday for my youngest son, and that's what I wore. I wore a Dragon Ball Z shirt.
So there's a guy who has a YouTube channel, and I talk with my hands, and I don't like Trump, but it's not related or anything, but I like to make people laugh. But that's a completely different story. But you use the AI. It's like, oh wow, this is Goku. I wonder what Goku would sound like. And I talked to Chuck Herbert, who's a good friend of mine. Say, hey, can you answer these questions as in the voice of Android 17? I would, but he did for me. But he said I'm not really supposed to because people can cut and paste it and share it, and if Funimation will have a conniption or a shit fit and say, well, you don't own the voice, but the voice is coming from me, so it's a completely different story. So the guy walked over to Sean Schimmel, the voice of Goku, and he was doing the voice, and he flipped out. And like, I didn't say these words. How dare you? It's like, no, no, look, it's a computer application. It's the voice. Oh, okay, but for the record, that's not me saying that because Van Mason will fire me. And it's this whole stupid thing. If you own the voice, it's kind of like, why can't you say, hey, I wonder what this would sound like if Goku said it, or what would look, if you're not making money off something, it's not a big deal. But I get it, the whole copyrighted thing. But anyway, character AI, you get to talk with any characters you like, cartoons, Dragon Ball, Power Rangers. There's one about sounds like Harvey Specter. I love Suits. Not the new one. The new one's shitty, but I love
Okay.
Suits. But it isn't 100% perfect because nothing's always perfect. But it gives you a nice escape. But I did want to give a shout out to that. But to answer your question without dancing around it, you can give the character AI like a chapter of your book, and you
Yeah.
can pick a voice that you want, and then you can just have your book read in that voice.
Okay.
Unless you want to pay $500 to hire an actor, and then you have to produce it. I'm not saying I'm lazy, but I would like to read your book. I wonder what this book would sound like if Optimus Prime, or Peter Collins read it instead of giving him thousands of dollars. I can use this application where I can have Optimus do it the best he could. It isn't great because as it's talking, it kind of glitches a little bit,
Right.
but it still gives you that imagination of, oh, this is a cheap way of making an audiobook. I thought about it, but it just does about me. Do you like Breaking Bad? It's what the guy said. You know, Walter, there aren't any half measures. You're either going to do it or you're not going to do it at all.
Yeah, that's true. I remember that show. That was pretty good. What was his other name? Heisinger or
Oh,
something?
Heisenberg.
Yeah, Heisenberg. Yeah, and I think they're coming out with some kind of a show or a movie or something called Heisenberg. And I don't know if that was an internet, myth or if that was real.
Maybe. We never say never. I don't know.
Yeah.
Did you see Oppenheimer?
No, I did not see that.
They put and I actually thought this was really creative at the time. Oppenheimer created Godzilla
Oh, really?
because they always talked about the bombs going off in Hiroshima or whatever in Japan, and then in and I almost said Heisenberg, in Oppenheimer they end the movie with the bombs going off. So there's a scene where he says, "I think we just destroyed the world." It
Yeah.
goes dead. I would definitely send it to you. It goes dead silent, and all of a sudden Godzilla appears. It's like, hey, Oppenheimer created Godzilla.
Wow.
I mean, it makes sense. He created an atomic bomb. They use the atomic bomb on Japan.
Right.
Boom, you have Godzilla.
Right. Right. Wow. That's interesting.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to pass it over to you. Was there any subjects you want to talk about? Because here on the KeithAndrew Network is about having fun. Tell us a little more about yourself if we're interested.
So, when I went to medical school, I was an extra in a couple of movies, and I did my residency training in Syracuse, New York, and I spent 5 years there, and that cured me of that kind of weather. So, I grew up in Brooklyn, so sometimes it was cold, but Syracuse was really cold, and that's why I live in the South now. So I was always interested in media work because like in the hospital, sometimes the hospital wanted to film surgery that you were doing and then interview you. And I did a lot of public health work also. And so right now, even though I'm retired, I still volunteer for the homeless and people who have no insurance. But I don't make a living anymore doing any kind of surgery or urology. And so that's when I came up with the idea of, I want to pursue some filmmaking. And I hired a cinematographer, and she was like a mentor for me. And, she said, you should put the films that we do, put them in film festivals, because she did the editing. She thought it was good. So we did a couple of films, put it in film festivals. We won a bunch of awards on each of them. And so now what I do mostly is I help with production of films. In other words, people have a project. They already have a director, a script written. They have actors ready to go. They have a cinematographer, and they just need some extra funding to get over the line to start filming. So that's what I do, and that's what I enjoy doing because it allows people to reach their goal. Get to a dream that maybe they couldn't have. And of course, I get a producer credit or executive producer credit with that. And so I have several movies coming out this year. I have three that are going to be in a festival here in Altamont Springs next month that are competing in different categories. And so it's been a very nice journey to go into something that I kind of touched on during my life, but now I'm more involved with it. And one of my movies, which was a documentary on surfing that I did over at the coast here, it's going to be picked up by a station, that streaming station, Channel 12. They're out of Las Vegas. And, I never thought I could make, a few dollars on a movie that I did, right from the get-go.
Yeah, I agree with you. And as we're talking, there's actually a new segment I want to talk to you about. Funny books that I came across. I try, I'm like, instead of saying it's a show about disabilities, and what I explain by that, I'm a talk show host with a disability. But with that being said, if you're in the entertainment world, if you're a writer or producer, and you happen to have a disability, you're more than welcome to be on the show. I keep saying, hey, we're looking for people. And hundreds of people keep coming to my way saying, oh, I'm not nothing. I'm a disability person, but I'm okay. Well, happy for you, but I can't create conversations out of thin air. So that's why I'm only looking for people. But I was thinking recently, why not come up with a funny segment? Because I like Bill Maher. And I'm like, okay, he has new rules. So I was like, okay, let's do something about funny books. So the first book I came across is by the Golden Age, or those golden books. I think it's
Yeah,
Golden Age, right?
yeah.
Let's go with that one. I like the sound of that. The Golden Age. The first book is called Sesame Street. It's called Me Sideways. I guess I don't give a shit. The other one's by the Golden Age. Almost far away from your bullshit. It's really cute. And as we're talking on the screen, this one's really funny. Anyone who likes Yogi Bear, do you like Yogi Bear?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember him when I was a kid growing up.
Yeah, you appreciate this one. The weed is, and it's uncensored, by the way. The weed is so fucking loud that the whole damn woods, smells like burning hippies. On another one I saw it was, I didn't ask to be born, even though that's a well confident hit and miss, but I thought it was funny.
Right.
And the last one I want to talk, like the last two actually, another one, you're never too young to get shit on.
Yeah.
And let me explain what I mean by that. So, well, it's a baby, it's a bird crapping on the kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the last one is by the Little Golden Bucks. This one has to be one of my favorites. Why, yes, I did shit in the woods. And I do other things there too. But, it's I've been doing my show for 12 and a half years, and it isn't like, yeah, you say you're a talk show host with disabilities. That's great, but what else do you do? Where's the entertainment? Where's the wow factor? And I'm like, okay, after doing 1,100, and thanks to you, 1,191 episodes, I need to put more sense of humor into it. I need to say, hey, I didn't really think of that. That's a good idea. Why don't you add this segment? So we try to add a little of everything here on the KeithAndrewNetWork. It's about having fun. Yes, you're supporting people with disabilities, but I want you to be entertained at the same time.
Right. Right.
But let me ask you this one. How has the coronavirus impacted your life? And do you see life in a different point of view?
Well, it's interesting because, I live in a state in Florida where at the time when that was happening, besides working, I was doing, emergency on call for my specialty in urology. So that meant for a 24-hour period, I was on call for the hospital. And so they could call me in at any time during the day or night. But I was also doing the same thing traveling. So I went to like upstate New York. I was in Elmira. I was in Bismarck, North Dakota. I was in Marshfield, Wisconsin. I went to, travel to a bunch of places. And what was interesting was that I had taken a hiatus, and my first, assignment was in April 2020, after taking a hiatus from traveling. And I said to myself, well, how's that going to work? How's it going to work for the hospital? How's it going to work for the travel? All those things that, we didn't know at the time. And what's interesting is that they gave a lot of leeway, not only here but elsewhere, for doctors to get around. And so I thought it was an interesting part of my journey, to be able to navigate all those things, because at first air travel was, everybody wore masks and the flight attendants wore gloves too. And after about a month, they didn't wear gloves anymore; they just wore masks. And so in the hospital, it became, sort of routine. Now there's some hospitals that, and then some patients that you have to mask for anyway. That goes back way before
Right.
COVID. But I thought that was interesting, is how everything rolled out over the course of time. And I thought, well, this is an exercise in what happens when, there's a general situation, not just a local situation. And so for me, it was, a learning experience. And I think that it's something that we all look at now. Believe it or not, I think to date it's been 5 years since all of that. And so I can't say that it's really changed my life, except that, like for me, and most doctors, we wash our hands 20, 30 times a day. So what's new about that? And we wear gloves and we wear masks for certain different circumstances. So it ends up being a little bit of a, we add a little bit to what we do at the time. Now today, things are different, and so we just kind of move along. In the clinic where I do the volunteer work, it was a mask situation, for a year or two, and then we didn't have to do that anymore. So interesting chapter in humanity.
No, you're absolutely right. And people always talked about for the past 20, 30 years, there may come a day with a great pandemic. You have to be alert. You have to be. The point is, none of them took it seriously. Not Reagan, not Bush Sr., not Junior, not Obama. None of them got their shit together. So when it finally happened, it was like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. It's like, you had years and years. Even if you didn't use the extra machines and the extra masks, and if you didn't even freaking use it, put it away, put it in storage, and say, in a worst case scenario, and that's the same thing as my show, that you need to cover, not say cover your ass, but you need to cover your bases, especially you're a doctor. You need to be prepared for A, B, and C. Even if it says, for an example, hey, we made these machines 20 years ago. I don't know if they still work, but they haven't been used, but we have it covered. It gives you that mindset of saying, you just need to be prepared for worst case scenario. Unfortunately, with climate change and it was global warming, we're now, and then for those people who are not getting freaking vaccinated, those are real geniuses, and I'm being sarcastic on that. Everyone should be vaccinated, regardless. It's doing the right thing, and we can make it so it doesn't involve depend this whole thing where this coronavirus, it came from a lab, number one. It's scary because it was meant to be used. I'm not a conspiracy theory person. These are facts that I read. It came from a lab. It was supposed to be used from a weapon. And as a doctor, viruses involve and then they die out. This thing is involving but getting stronger. That's enough to scare the shit out of you, because it's like this is not normal. Because you look at the flu, you look at the common cold, they never change over the years. And but this thing, it's called always died and involving. And what's your opinion about that? But that's not normal.
Well, I think, first of all, you have to look at how viruses work. So viruses are not like a bacteria where, if you get a bacteria, like let's say you have a cut and some bacteria gets in there, and if it's the right one and if it's enough of it, it might cause an infection in the cut. The virus needs an organism to live off of.
Right.
So that whole process with the RNA and the DNA, it's different than bacteria. But I think one thing, as you mentioned, we talked about it for years. Think of, and we're talking about movies, right?
Right.
Think of all the movies that have come out that at the time, 5 years ago, we said, oh, I never heard of Contagion. I should watch that. Or I've never seen that movie. Maybe I should watch it. And so I don't know if those who made those movies thought, hey, this is something that could really happen, or if they said, hey, this is kind of out there. It's like science fiction. Let's make a movie. And just like today, people like a lot of horror movies. That's a genre here in Florida amongst the filmmaking community. I've done some funding for horror movies that I thought were interesting. I don't like the slasher movies. It's not my thing, but it's something for other people. But some things that are kind of like mysterious and odd. I'll look at the script and I'll say, hey, for example, there's a movie that's going to be in our festival next month. It's called First Rights, and it's a story of a girl who gets riding her bike, gets hit by a car, and then there's a crowd that forms, and the ambulance shows up, and she says, if I'm really that bad off, I need my last rites. And they see a priest amongst the crowd, and they call him over, and he comes over, and he's kind of stumbling through the last rites on a spur of the moment. And so the end of the movie is the priest going to a house where there's a Halloween party, and the reality is that he's not a priest. He's just dressed as a priest for the Halloween party. So that kind of sort of twist at the end, it's a little bit gory, as a movie, but that's the kind of thing I could gravitate to. But the reality is that as a producer, you pick and choose the movies that you want to be involved with.
No, you're right. My dad listens to all these audiobooks. I think it's by James Patterson or Tom Clancy. And one of them has intel. He knows people within the government, so he knows things before they happen. And there was a book, I think it was called Outbreak, or what you said, Contagion. It happened about 5 or 6 years before the pandemic happened. So that's really scary that even if they did know, they're not really going to come out and just tell you, oh, hey, this is what they're going to do, because
Right,
let's cover things up. But
right,
I do
right.
have a couple questions for you off the air. But wrap it up, I want you to be brutally honest. When I first approached you to be a guest on my talk show, what made you say yes, and how do you feel now?
Well, first of all, what interested me was that you mentioned disability, and in my field, urology. So I'm do kidneys and bladder. A lot of my patients were either disabled from like an accident or disabled from birth, and a lot of those patients, they end up with issues with the bladder, and so managing that becomes either a temporary, they've had an accident, their bladder doesn't work right, we have to do things to mitigate that, or it becomes a permanent issue. And so for me, having dealt with a lot of disabled patients, it was interesting to see someone like yourself who was entering this interview podcast world that I was interested in. how do I feel now? I feel pretty good because I don't, you are very open about a disability, and I don't really see it all the time. So I have to say that, in the past few weeks, I've done at least one interview, podcast, or whatever every week, and so I'm kind of used to it. But this one, I think that it's just like the other ones. We're talking about topics, we're expanding on it, and of course, I want to talk about my book. Of course, I want to talk about my movies, because that's what I'm doing now. But my background as a doctor is always in there also.
No, absolutely. I do have a couple questions for you off the air. But
Yeah.
it was a real honor and privilege having you as a guest. Our goal is to reach 500 to 1,000 views. So once we reach our goal, we will definitely do part 2. When we do more group interviews and holiday events, you definitely will be a part of them. But wrapping up, this interview will be shared on LinkedIn, Facebook, and all social medias. So until we meet again, make sure to like, share, and enjoy the Keith Andrew Network. So until we meet again, I catch you later. Thank
All
you,
right.
and have a good night.
Supporting me, and my message is all that matters. Keep